The Young and the Restless spoilers. In the midst of Genoa City's ceaseless scheming and shifting alliances, an audacious plan was unfolding behind closed doors, a plan designed to tip the scales in favor of those who had long been outmaneuvered. Jack and Chance had met in secret, their whispered conversation thick with determination and cunning as they meticulously mapped out a trap that would leave no doubt they were destined to be the ultimate victors. The perfect deception. Jack's proposal was as daring as it was diabolical. "We prepare a wedding," he declared, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of a well-laid plan. "And let's announce that Alan and Traci are to be married." The idea was simple on its surface, yet its ramifications were anything but. By orchestrating the nuptial ceremony, they would lure Alan into believing that he had secured a golden ticket, a chance at legitimacy and acceptance. In truth, Traci would serve as the bait, her role meticulously designed to ensnare him in a web from which escape would be nearly impossible. Chance agreed without hesitation, adding, "Once he's in the trap, we'll have undeniable proof that he's compromised, exactly as we've suspected all along." Their voices, low and resolute in the secluded meeting room, carried the weight of decades of rivalry and revenge. They knew the stakes, failure was not an option, and every detail had to be flawless. Martin's uneasy return. However, amidst the excitement of the plan, there was one variable that threatened to upend everything: Martin. A man known for his hypervigilance and wariness, Martin had always been the one to sense that something was amiss. Word of his return to Genoa City had spread quickly. As he arrived, a throng of well-wishers and acquaintances greeted him with warm smiles and open arms, but behind the facade of celebration, Martin's instincts screamed that danger lurked just beneath the surface. The overwhelming reception, rather than offering solace, only heightened his sense of foreboding. With every cheer and congratulatory pat on the back, he felt more trapped in a scenario he couldn't quite understand, a prelude, perhaps, to something far more sinister. The wedding trap springs. The stage was set. The wedding, a public spectacle of joy and union, was designed to be the moment when Alan would finally take the bait. Traci, standing at the center of the plan, was both the symbol of hope and the linchpin of their strategy. But as the day wore on and the gathering grew larger, the carefully orchestrated plan began to unravel in ways that no one had predicted. At the very moment when the festivities reached their zenith, chaos erupted. Alan, sensing that his carefully constructed facade was slipping, lashed out. In a heartbeat, the veneer of civility shattered. In a fit of desperation and fear of being caught in the snare, Alan's hand darted out, and he clutched at Traci's throat. His grip was vicious and unyielding, and the festive air turned to one of horror as screams rang out. Traci's eyes widened in terror as she struggled against the crushing pressure. "Let me go," she screamed, her voice raw with pain and panic. The crowd's murmur of shock soon rose to a cacophony of dismay. Jack, witnessing the scene with a mix of incredulity and regret, stepped forward, pleading, "Alan, please, calm down. We only want you to marry Traci. This isn't about hurting anyone." His voice, thick with desperation, echoed in the stunned silence that followed. A trap unraveling. It was clear that Alan had been caught in the trap. They had wanted to expose him, to force him into a corner where he could no longer hide behind false promises and smooth words. But as the situation spiraled out of control, it became evident that the trap had backfired. Alan, cornered and enraged, was not the willing participant they had anticipated. His violent reaction was a desperate bid to wrest control from a plan that had grown too dangerous, too unpredictable. The pandemonium reached a fever pitch. Amid the chaos, Martin's earlier unease transformed into stark terror. The man who had been so cautious now found himself witnessing an unfolding nightmare, an event that would forever change the dynamics of power in Genoa City. As Alan's grip tightened and Traci's protests grew louder, it was clear that the calculated strategy had become a volatile powder keg. Desperation and betrayal. Jack's plea was both an appeal for reason and a desperate attempt to salvage what remained of the plan. "Alan, please, listen to me," he cried. His eyes locked onto the enraged man. "This is our chance to set things right, to make sure you're held accountable without causing any more harm. We're not your enemies here. We only want you to see reason." But Alan, fueled by panic and the realization that he was ensnared in a scheme far larger than himself, fought against the inevitable. His eyes darted wildly. And for a moment, the determination that had once defined him was replaced by raw, unbridled fear. The scene was one of tragic irony. Traci, the intended symbol of a new beginning, had become a hostage in her own life, a pawn in a dangerous game of corporate and personal warfare. The plan, which had once seemed so clear-cut and inevitable, was now mired in violence and betrayal. In the chaos of the moment, every promise, every calculated risk, was laid bare as the bitter reality of their world took hold. The aftermath. As the initial shock faded and sirens began to wail in the distance, the repercussions of the ill-fated trap rippled through the corridors of power. The wedding, intended to be a symbol of unity and the triumphant reclamation of control, had instead become a harbinger of further discord. In the days that followed, the incident would be dissected and debated by allies and adversaries alike. Jack and Chance, realizing that their plan had spiraled far beyond their expectations, were left to grapple with the fallout. The once sterile boardroom discussions were replaced with frantic attempts to restore order, to calm the volatile emotions that had erupted in public. Martin's wary return had become a chilling reminder that even the most meticulously devised plans could unravel under the pressure of human emotion and instinct. In the aftermath, as law enforcement and crisis managers took over the scene, questions remained unanswered. Had they truly anticipated every move, every reaction? Or had they underestimated the unpredictable nature of the human heart, a heart that, when cornered and betrayed, would rebel with a force no one could control? A world on the edge. For Alan, the repercussions were immediate and severe. The realization that he had been ensnared in a trap, one that was meant to force him into a public union with Traci, only deepened his rage and desperation. His outburst, violent and unrestrained, marked a turning point. It was no longer merely a contest of corporate power or a battle of wits, it had become a raw struggle for survival. A contest where the line between victim and villain blurred into insignificance. For Traci, the experience was a harrowing ordeal, one that shattered her illusions of control and safety. Her screams, echoing through the tumult, were a poignant reminder of the cost of ambition and deception. And for Jack and Chance, the failure of their plan was a bitter pill to swallow, a stark illustration that in Genoa City, even the best-laid plans can collapse under the weight of unforeseen realities. As the dust settled over the tumultuous scene, the lessons were clear. In the high-stakes game of power, love, and betrayal, every alliance was fragile. And every trap could backfire in the most catastrophic of ways. In this volatile arena, trust was a rare commodity. And the price of deception was measured in shattered lives and irrevocable consequences. The story of that fateful wedding trap would soon become another chapter in the ever-evolving saga of Genoa City, a cautionary tale of ambition run amok, where the desire to control and conquer ultimately led to chaos, violence, and a bitter reckoning for all involved. Under the oppressive weight of a tense, suffocating atmosphere in Genoa City, chaos reigned supreme. In the midst of the turmoil, Traci had collapsed, her body succumbing to the overwhelming stress and fear that had taken hold. The air was thick with the sound of rapid footsteps, urgent voices, and the distant wail of sirens as the crisis escalated. Alan, his eyes wild with determination and madness, was far from calm. With a cold, calculated tone, he barked out orders that sent shivers down everyone's spine. "We need a plane, now. Get one, and we're getting out of here." His voice echoed off the nearby buildings, resonating with a mix of desperation and authority that brooked no argument. The plan was as audacious as it was dangerous, a daring escape from the very heart of Genoa. orchestrated under the cover of turmoil. Jack, forced into a corner by circumstances beyond his control, had no choice but to comply with Alan's demand. Despite his best efforts, however, every attempt to secure a plane ended in failure. Time and again, obstacles emerged, a tangled web of logistical nightmares, unexpected resistance, and the ever-present threat of law enforcement closing in. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and Jack's frustration grew with every passing moment. Realizing that the precarious situation could soon spiral out of control, Jack issued an urgent ultimatum in a voice filled with a mix of exasperation and concern. "Alan, you need to surrender. If you don't, you're asking to get yourself shot. Police have surrounded this area." His words were a stark warning, a final appeal to reason in a maelstrom of chaos. Yet Alan's eyes burned with a relentless determination that refused to be quelled by threats or logic. Alan's plan had taken an even more twisted turn. With grim resolve, he declared that he wanted Traci to join him on a flight to Paris. "Listen," he hissed, his tone both terrifying and mesmerizing, "once we land at the airport, I'm going to let you go. You'll be free." The promise of release was both a balm and a curse, a small glimmer of hope in the darkness that masked the true horror of the situation. Traci, though overwhelmed by terror, found herself ensnared by a tormenting web of conflicting emotions. In her heart, a bitter love for Alan still flickered, a dangerous, irrational attachment that made it nearly impossible for her to defy his command. Yet, beneath that complicated affection lay a well of deep-seated hatred, a visceral loathing for the very man who now held her captive. In that fateful moment, with no other choice and driven by the tangled duality of love and loathing, Traci reluctantly obeyed. Her mind screamed in protest even as her body moved in submission. The scene at the airport was surreal, a macabre dance between freedom and captivity. As the plane idled on the tarmac, bathed in the eerie glow of emergency lights and the encroaching darkness of night, the tension reached a fever pitch. Jack's earlier pleas still echoed in the air, a ghost of a warning that seemed to vanish amid the clamor of engines and distant shouts. The looming threat of law enforcement had turned the airport into a crucible of imminent violence, where every moment teetered on the edge of catastrophe. Inside the aircraft, a stifling silence reigned. Traci sat huddled in a corner, her eyes glazed with a mixture of resignation and inner turmoil. The promise of liberation upon landing in Paris felt like a cruel illusion, an escape route paved with uncertainty and dread. Alan's presence was inescapable, his every word, every gesture, was a constant reminder of the twisted power he wielded over her life. Despite the chaos outside, the interior of the plane became a microcosm of conflicted emotions, where love battled hate and hope warred with despair. Jack's earlier attempts to neutralize the situation now seemed like a distant echo, a reminder of how even the most well-intentioned plans could crumble under the weight of human frailty and unforeseen chaos. His heart pounded with regret and anxiety as he realized that their plan had spiraled far beyond their control. The inevitability of the approaching confrontation loomed large, casting a shadow over every decision, every desperate hope that had once flickered in their eyes. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the gravity of the situation became undeniably clear. Traci's reluctant compliance, Alan's unwavering demands, and Jack's futile attempts to steer the unfolding disaster towards any semblance of order all converged into a moment of pure, unadulterated dread. The sirens outside grew louder, the voices of law enforcement more insistent, and the countdown to an uncertain future began ticking away relentlessly. In that final, heart-stopping moment before departure, the airport became a stage for the ultimate test of human resilience, a test where the boundaries between love and hate, freedom and captivity, reason and madness blurred into an indistinguishable haze. With each second that passed, the promise of escape and the threat of violence danced together in a macabre ballet, leaving everyone on board and those watching from afar to wonder, could anyone truly escape the consequences of a plan so meticulously, and yet so disastrously, executed? The tragic irony of the situation was unmistakable. Traci, caught between the magnetic pull of a man she both loved and despised, was forced into a role she never wanted, a pawn in a game that had already spiraled into uncontrollable chaos. And as the engines roared to life, heralding the beginning of a flight that promised both freedom and peril, every person present was left to grapple with the haunting realization that in Genoa City, the line between salvation and damnation was frighteningly thin.